everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we talk about building wealth and gaining time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. And so if you are a numbers person, if you are an analytics type person, and if you love short-term rentals, this really is going to be a great episode for you. So today we've got John Bianchi on, and we're going to talk all about data, all about short-term rentals, and what he's doing to help provide clarity to people to help make great investment decisions. And so just a little bit of a background about John. So he's living in Canada right now. Back in 2017, you helped other people and sold a $10 million investment portfolio and started an Airbnb Arbitrage business at the age of 24. So do the math there. We know how old you are. But within 2 years, you were managing 15 cash flowing Airbnbs in Chicago. And so now that's moving into where you're at today, becoming known as the Airbnb Data Guy. And that's what you are and what you do. So you talk about data, you're a numbers guy, you're an analytics guy. And so we're going to dig into that today. So why don't you just go ahead and get us started and just kind of share a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you're at today.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate the introduction. Super excited to be on this podcast with you, by the way. So my background, it kind of bounces around a little bit, but I did have a $10 million investment portfolio. I was an advisor. So, that's spread out around like 200 clients, helping them with their retirement, which is a fun thing to do when you're, 22, 23, and you're taking care of a 6-year-old's retirement fund, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was able to build that business up from 21 to 24, but realized I absolutely hated it. And so I was actively looking for another business to build and came across Airbnb. And I, opened up a couple, was able to understand the operations behind it. Then I was able to raise some money and go open up quite a few more. And when I say open up, I was renting the homes to start off. So I actually have never purchased property, just for all your listeners to know that right off the bat, right? But I am planning on it. I want to throw that out there. I am actively working on it. But yeah, so I did the rental arbitrage model. And then I also had quite a few properties that I also managed for other people at the same time. Got that up to 15 locations. And then in 2020, when everything went to shit, I actually had somebody who also wanted to buy my entire portfolio, like right at the exact same time. So I consider myself lucky because I was able to actually get out of the portfolio at a profit. But if hindsight's 2020, if I were to do it again, I probably would have just kept the portfolio, figured out a way to make it through those, like 6 months or so, and then it would have just kept going. But yeah, so during that entire time period, one thing I did extremely well was understand the Airbnb data that was out there. So there's a site called AirDNA. It has all of the data. A ton of it is bad data, like 80% of it is bad data. And you really have to understand exactly like how to comp properties, because comping properties in the Airbnb space is outrageously difficult. It's not like the long-term rental space at all. Like as an example, in Blue Ridge, Georgia, if you have a beautiful cabin with an absolutely stunning view, you'll make $50,000 more than if that exact same cabin were to be with no view. So a view makes $50,000 a year, right? That's insane to think, but it's true. So helping people. So anyways, I was able to figure out this process of how to actually sort through this data. I sold my portfolio and I'm like, I'm going to maybe build a course to teach other people how to use this data. And so I did that and I had no idea how to sell it. So I put onto YouTube for free. And it literally just like I let it sit out there and almost 10,000 people have gone through it now. But from that, I had so many people reach out to me for like advice, help, whatever, that I actually turned into another business altogether called Point Analytics, where I help people with Airbnb. So it's an Airbnb Airbnb data. So I help people with Airbnb data and help them find the most profitable Airbnb in their location and ensure that their investment gets the most return, the highest possible return, and ensuring that they don't lose any money. That's really like my whole thing, is making sure you don't buy or sign a lease that is not going to be profitable, because the vast majority of homes honestly are better off as long-term rentals than short-term rentals. So you got to be strategic, and it's getting even harder with the new interest rates.
Just for people that maybe are newer to the short-term rental space or haven't heard about it, Airbnb arbitrage, I want to just quickly touch on that for people that don't understand it. So Airbnb arbitrage is essentially, you see an opportunity in the market, you've got somebody who's already owning a property, and you can come in and lease that property from them and run an Airbnb business out of it. and make profit off of it without ever owning the property. And so it's finding the right person, and you're essentially that middleman. You don't have to buy it. You can make money off of it, and the landlord's happy because they're getting their rent. You're happy because you're getting everything above and beyond that. And so that's where you can benefit through Airbnb arbitrage. So
exactly. Yeah, that's what arbitrage is. And out of the three different options, which I can explain three options, arbitrage is without a doubt the worst option. However, it is the best first option, right?
yes,
It's the best way to gain experience. So the reason it's the worst option is because you have to sign a lease, which means you're taking on that liability. Plus you have the utilities, the cleaning, the Netflix subscription, all the amenities, like those are all liabilities, right? And you're not gaining any equity in that property. And it's really hard to sell one of those leases. I've done it. It's difficult, right? So to sell that like contract, because it's really just a lease. And you also have to put up like somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 for the furniture, depending on the size of the units, right? So taking on a whole bunch of liability, and you got a upfront expenses as well, investment, right? And so it's the worst option. Whereas if you compare that with managing, when you manage somebody else's property, they buy the furniture, you just manage it, you take 20% of all the revenue that comes through, and you have no upfront investment, and so you just like are taking whatever comes through. So that's definitely a better option. But the third option of actually owning it is hands down the best, without a doubt, because you actually gain net worth by an equity from that property, and you can have it long term, and you can do whatever you want with it, and there's a lot more control and options with that. So
yep.
Yeah, just want to explain those three options real quick.
Well, and that's interesting for people to know too, because there's a lot of buzz out there about short-term rentals and Airbnb. And for people to understand, especially people getting started or people maybe who don't have access to money themselves, here's some low cost options to get started, to get your feet wet, to get comfortable. And yeah, you did a great job of laying out the kind of the positives and the negatives of each, but you don't have to buy, you see these stories of people buying $1 million property, and it's like, well, okay, if I'm going to put 20% down, I need to have $200,000. I don't have $200,000, therefore I shouldn't start. And the answer is no. There's lots of opportunities to get started. You just have to understand the positives and the negatives each. But like you said, managing is a great opportunity to get in, get comfortable, get your feet wet. You're helping other people, and you're not putting up your own money. And then the arbitrage piece, yeah, you're taking on some risk. You don't get to see the high side benefit of the appreciation, being able to sell that asset down the road too. But then, yeah, there's the purchase, which provides a lot of great opportunity for people.
Yeah, 100%. And the route I always tell people, so like if you're wondering which option you should take, right? It's not a matter of like which one, but it's a matter of all three at different times, right? So like if you have absolutely no experience, going up to somebody who has a home and saying like, hey, I'll manage this for you, give me 20% of everything, they're going to go, you have no idea what you're doing. Why would I trust you? Why am I going to do this? Right. So that's why arbitrage is usually the one you do first, because you're paying to get that experience, right? The only other option is going up to somebody with a vacation rental saying, hey, I'll manage your property for free. Let me do it for free so I can figure out the operations, and then you're going to be able to get your next contract, because someone's going to believe that you can actually do it because you have some proof, right? So those are the two sort of options to get started. But then once you're going, management contracts you can pick up all day, but you should really only pick up the rental arbitrage contracts unless the data 100% says that it's going to be a good cash flowing property for you, and it makes sense to put that investment in there. You know what I mean? And if you don't have that like 1000% confidence in it, pick up another management contract and wait for the next one to show up. And then while you're doing that, keep building up your reserves, and so you can start buying the properties and really building your net worth over years.
So for somebody looking to get started here, looking to make their first purchase, I'm here in, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's like, okay, I live in a community where it snows, it's cold. We have some lake cabin opportunities. I've heard stories of people in all different states. And so I think sometimes people can get a little bit paralyzed thinking about, here's the entire United States or even the world, maybe, and Canada, right? So we've got a large swath of opportunity here. How in the heck do I get started? How in the heck do I find a place that's going to work for me?
Yeah, super easy, especially if you're just getting started and you're not trying to spend a ton. Stay local. Like, I can't stress that enough. Just find something local. Even if it doesn't make you $1 million, you know what I mean? And it barely, like, if you just are losing money on it, or if you're barely breaking even, like whatever, Airbnb is so different. There are so many little operational nuances to an Airbnb, and to understand how those things work, there's a huge learning curve. If you're trying to figure out that learning curve, with a place that's 5 hours away, or even like on the other side of the country, it is going to be hell. I opened up 2 homes in Scottsdale from Chicago after already having 10 places, and it was absolute hell to try and make that work, right? And so when you're staying local, like just stay local, find a place local, find somebody maybe that you know, and like open it up and get your experience. I actually started by having a spare room in my apartment, and I just rented out the spare room, and that's literally how I gained my experience. And so it was completely free, and I was able to, you know, cover my rent. I was barely making any money from it, but I learned a ton from it, and it's like expanded into everything that I've been able to do now, right? So stay local when you're first getting started. Once you get your a little bit more of an understanding, I always recommend go somewhere that you actually like to go. You know what I mean? This is a vacation rental. You can use it as a vacation rental. When people are like, where should I go? I just want to go anywhere. It's like, no, you don't want to go anywhere. If you hate the snow, then don't go where the snow is. You know what I mean? Like for myself personally, I love like the Arizona, Sedona, Zion, like those places are so cool to me. Yosemite. So like I would put way more effort into an area like that. Like I would be drawn to want to make the best Airbnb or you know, do whatever out in that area way more than I would want to do something in Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm somewhat close to Michigan, right? And so anyways, that's my advice when you're thinking about it that way.
Well, and even too, I mean, you can utilize a second home mortgage to be able to get a lower down payment. So if I'm looking to go somewhere, now there is stipulations around that. You have to spend a certain amount of time there. But like you said, if it's a place you want to go, like for me in Minnesota, you know, going down to Florida, yeah, I think you can convince me to spend 2 weeks in Florida each year, especially in January and February when it's cold. So that's the beauty of the asset that you own, is you have the ability to go down and visit it. Yeah, you're not going to be able to have bookings during that time, but you can get a mortgage. And so obviously check with your lender first. You know, I'm not making promises here, but check with your lender. But a second home mortgage is a great way to do that, where you can maximize a lower down payment, have a vacation home now that you have to go for, you know, 2 weeks out of the year to be able to fulfill that, and be able to make income the other 50 weeks out of the year. You know, what else would you recommend for people? How else can we get started? Or if we're now looking at an additional spot, where would we want to go?
Yeah. So there's sort of a 3-step operation. Like I try and make it as simple as possible. Think about getting it started with 3 steps. First, figure out the regulation, because there's tons of regulation absolutely everywhere. And you have to make sure that it's actually legal where you want to go. So figure out the regulation as step 1. Step 2, figure out the data. And step 3, figure out the operations. So I don't recommend trying to understand how to operate an Airbnb until you actually have the Airbnb, right? So do everything you can to figure out the regulations, which will, you know, shouldn't take too much time. The data is where you want to spend the majority of your time to actually understand where is a good spot to buy. And then you can figure out the operations. Now, the reason I mention it in that order is because that's the step you have to take. But when it comes to the data, think about it in a demand sense, right? So hotels are in a lot of places, but they're not absolutely everywhere, right? So when I say demand, if you're opening up an Airbnb, it's essentially a hotel, and people have to be traveling wherever you're going to be going, which seems super simple, but like the reality is, what I'm trying to say here is like, find the places where majority of people are traveling, where there's nonstop travel, where people are going to continue to keep traveling for years and years and years, right? So like the easiest example of this is national parks. People are going to keep going to national parks. National parks aren't going anywhere. Disneyland's not going anywhere, right? Like beaches aren't going anywhere for the most part. Rising tide's not going to help, but you know, all these things, these things, like those are sort of the things you want to be thinking about, right? I may sound very like obvious, but you know, sometimes people be like, well, I want to go, you know, look at, they'll name like, I don't know, like Indianapolis. Indianapolis just does not have a lot of tourism demand. You know what I mean? It just really doesn't. So like, there's not a lot of money being spent on Airbnbs in that area. And then therefore it usually makes more sense to have a long-term rental there than a short-term rental there. If you compare that directly with like Nashville or Austin, where there's just a crazy amount of short-term demand for people going for bachelorette parties and bachelor parties, like, you know, that's how you kind of have to think about it. So if you are trying to decide where should I go, right? First, look at the regulation, then pay attention to like, where is there a lot of demand? And then from there, you really want to start diving into the data. And I can walk through that, my like quick analysis on that if you'd like.
Before I turn you loose on the data, I was just going to quick go back and speak to the regulation. You know, for people that are newer to this, wondering, okay, what are the regulations that are out there? So number one, there might be rules and regulations around, can I operate a short-term rental in a city? So here, I'm Minneapolis, St. Paul. There's some suburbs that have said, no, you can't operate that. And short-term rental could mean, less than 30 days, however they define it. So there's some cities that just say, no, you can't. There's other cities that might limit the number of short-term rentals that you have. And then there's other spots where there's some sort of association in place. So I know once you get into Florida, there's lots of associations, and some associations might say no, or a condo complex, apartment complex, townhouse complex, things like that, where the association might say no. So that's where not only do you have to look at the, maybe the county level, the city level, you also have to go down and look at the association level to find out, because there's certain pockets within a certain city where you might be able to do it here and not do it here. So there is rules and regulations. The best place to start is a Google search. The other place to start is to call that city too and say, hey, what rules and regulations do you have? Because while you might have been able to fly under the radar in the past before cities had regulations, if you're planning on holding this asset long term, you want to stay above board with people, and you don't want to have a very profitable operation running and then find out that the city or the association now learned about it and they're going to shut you down. Now what are you going to do? So better to just follow the rules right off the bat.
Hunter, couldn't agree more with that. You just I went into Chicago. Chicago had some regulations. I tried to fall within the regulations. I'm not the best at legalese. I just really am not. And I picked up a couple homes that weren't technically legal, and it kind of screwed me over in the long run. And I was trying to follow the rules. I just misunderstood it, stuff like that, right? So but it really, really becomes difficult when you have a home that you've invested in that becomes illegal or is illegal to begin with. Now you have to try and figure out an exit strategy or getting it into a new home or something like that. So yeah, and it just never works out in the long run. And I would never, ever in a million years buy a property that could potentially become illegal, right? If a city doesn't have any regulations in place and they're talking about it, you just don't want to buy a home there, because it likely could potentially be illegal, and then you have to get rid of it, right? So go to places where there's already regulations established. Once they're established, they usually don't make them that much worse anytime soon. Right.
Yeah. And even to think about an exit strategy, there is medium-term rentals, there is long-term rentals. Think through okay, what would happen if something were to happen here? What could I do? And picking a property where there's an acceptable exit strategy if something were to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Even there's a guy that, we're looking to buy some properties together. And one thing that he always says is worst case scenario, we have to rent this thing out long-term. Could we get the rent? You know what I mean? To cover at least the mortgage. And so that's something that we're paying a lot of attention to with all the different areas that we're going into. So yeah, always have an exit strategy, but always remember, it is a piece of property. You can rent it, right? You know what I mean? Or even short term, or you can get someone in there. Usually, I mean, if you're in the middle of nowhere, it's going to be a little bit more difficult than a city, but yeah, usually you're okay.
With that being said, yeah, talk about the analysis here. What are we doing, John?
Yeah. That's a very broad question. I don't know. So I got to think
in 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. We could talk for this about hours, but
I could go for days.
We've targeted an area that we're interested in. What are some tangible next steps here to take?
Okay. This is my 100% standard advice. It's the path that I go for the company that I work for. So just, I'm a full-time short-term rental data analyst for a short-term rental investment fund. I'm the data analyst, right? So I'm looking at Airbnb data all day, every day. And this is the route that I take. And so I'll explain that route. Now, the issue that I usually see people doing is that they'll find an individual property. So they have a budget in an area, and they'll go, what meets my budget, right? You know what I mean? What's within my budget? And then they go and buy that home and turn it into an Airbnb. Hands down, the worst way you can do it, without a doubt. And the reason being is because you don't know if that home in that area is actually going to be really profitable or not. And sometimes people they'll use a couple of tools out there to try to reaffirm that yes, this property that perfectly meets their budget is the one that they should get, right? But it's really just a kind of backwards way to go, because if you have to go through so many properties over and over again, waiting for them to come online to see if it's actually going to be a good Airbnb or not. So the way that I recommend going about this is take it all the way back to the entire market, right? Take a look at your entire city, all of the data within your city, and then figure out which neighborhoods in that city have the most demand, which areas are because whichever has the most demand has the most money being made, right? Usually that can be the cluster of where all the Airbnbs are. Or you can use some of the software tools like AirDNA that are out there to actually understand how much money is being made in each one of these different areas. And additionally, like my company helps with this specifically. But the idea is that you want to look at your entire market and narrow it down to the zip codes of the neighborhoods that are without a doubt have the most demand, are making the most money on Airbnb, right? Then from there, what you want to do is you want to be able to figure out which unit size, so like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, is making the most money out of those in that neighborhood specifically. And then and the reason why the bedrooms is really important is because, as an example, in Chicago, a 3-bedroom in Lincoln Park makes about 60,000, whereas a 4-bedroom makes about 100,000, right? And the difference between those two in rent, at least, is about like $500, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a huge difference in profitability just by having a 4-bedroom. And the logic behind it is there's no 5 bedrooms in the area. So the 4 bedrooms are the biggest. So they can ask the highest premium, whereas the 3-bedroom can't ask more than a 4-bedroom. So
Right.
you really want to understand, you have to understand that bedroom count makes a big difference, right? Another great example of this is in a certain area in Phoenix. 2 bedrooms make 30,000, 3 bedrooms make 90,000, right? Huge difference. And so really understand what the different bedroom sizes. Now, it's not enough to just look at the bedroom size in a neighborhood and say, okay, I'm going to make, whatever, right? There's still additional details about that specific home that are going to drive the revenue, right? And so you have to figure out what are the details of this home that are going to allow it to do really well. And so what I always do is I look at the top performing properties of that certain unit size in that specific area to figure out what they have that's allowing them to make $150,000, whatever it may be, right? So I'll give an example of Scottsdale, because it's a really easy example and I know it, it's back of my head. In Scottsdale, you've got to have a large backyard. First off, you have to have a pool and a pool heater. Like, that is without a doubt, I guarantee you have to have that. However, you also have to have a large backyard. And I'm just saying, not just saying like a decently sized backyard, a good sized backyard, right? We look for properties that have to be at least 7,500 square feet or larger, right? As a total property size. And the reason being is because you actually need like a little putting green in the backyard for people, because that's the biggest driver is golf. And so people need to be able to do that. You also need to have a fire pit area. You need to have a little outdoor bar with ideally like a cabana or something like over top. You need to have lounge chairs, and you need to also have like a house that's big enough to have 2 living rooms so that you can have a pool table in one. You need all of these things because your competition has them, right? And so you can't beat your competition unless you have all of these things. Otherwise, you got to expect that you're going to make significantly less money, right? So when it comes to data, right? Like, when I think of data, I go the entire city, then I figure out the neighborhoods, then I figure out the unit sizes, then I figure out every single amenity and feature within that area that are driving the revenue, that are allowing people to make the most amount of money. And I create a list of everything. And then from that list, I know what I need in the home to be able to make X amount of money, right? And it's the Burger King logic. So, McDonald's spends millions of dollars to figure out what corner to be on. Burger King opens up across the street, right? We're doing the same thing. We're replicating what's already working across the street. And so the beauty of it is that you can do all this work and you can figure out, okay, 4 bedrooms going to make $100,000. And I need all these features. And you have like a list. You essentially have created yourself a buy box of everything that you need. And then you just simply plug into Zillow. I'm looking for a property that's, 500,000 to 600,000. That's a 4-bedroom within this certain area with a certain square footage that has a pool. And then they'll pop up. And then it's like, cool, that home there cash flows, that one there cash flows. And you can just very confidently purchase that property and know exactly what you have to do to hit those numbers. Instead of the opposite, where you're just like going to the property first. The finding the property should be the very last thing you do. Right.
And one thing I was just going to mention quick for folks that are newer here and newer to the short-term space, but maybe have investment experience is, I work with investors quite a bit buying multifamily homes, a lot of long-term rentals. Your mindset with long-term rentals is you want to provide a solid place for them to live, and you're looking for solid amenities, but it doesn't have to be over the top. If you're looking for like good quality, middle class type stuff, if you're in the luxury space, that's totally different. So a lot of investors that I work with, they have this mindset around solid, stable, decent, investments. When we're looking at something like an Airbnb, we're now in the hospitality business, right? So it's not in the housing business, it's in the hospitality business. And like you touched on a lot of great points. In Scottsdale, they want golf, they want a pool, they want a cabana, they want a fire pit. And so you're looking for the amenities are going to accentuate the revenue and the profit that you're going to have, versus when I'm looking in the long-term rental space, I'm looking for solid, stable, rental quality type atmosphere. Here you're looking for hospitality quality.
Exactly. Like
Yep.
without and the thing about I haven't bought any long-term rentals, so I can't really say, but I'm assuming the livable solid things are pretty standard across the board wherever you go. You use solid kitchen, solid bath, stuff along those lines, right?
Yeah. And when they're making decisions around vanities, countertops, flooring, paint, decorate, not even, well, no decorations really in the long-term space, but you're looking for budget friendly, can hold up well over time. Here it's a different mentality because you're trying to attract in and drive revenue, drive profit. And so those
Right.
amenities matter. You're in the hospitality business. That's your mindset versus long-term rental. It's a totally different mindset.
Exactly. And I'll also say that it changes per market for the most part, right? You don't need that what I just explained for Scottsdale. You don't need that in the Smoky Mountains, and you
Right.
wouldn't do very well in the Smoky Mountains if that's what you had, right?
Yeah.
And so whereas like you maybe need the exact same thing across the board anywhere in the United States for long-term rental, it changes for a short term, and you've got to pay attention to that data. I know like when most people hear data, most of the time when people hear data, they think of numbers, but data could also be, does everybody have a fire pit in their backyard, right? And if that's the case, then you go, yep, they do, I need one too, right? And so like that's kind of the fun data. I like to think of it that way, right? So anyways, just wanted to kind of bring that up.
What else now? In terms of I've found those properties, what else do I need to know?
Like honestly, not much. Like that's if you like the place you're at, the regulations are good, you've gone through the data, and you have a general idea of how much a certain home can make within certain areas, and that there's homes for sale in that area that meet that standard or that requirement, then it's really just a matter of like budgeting everything else. So you've now found the magical number, right? So to me, the magical number is, what is my top line revenue? Because everything else is very figure outable, right? Like what's the cleaning fee going to be? You can make some phone calls and figure that out. And so you now can figure out if how profitable the location is going to be for you, right? And like how much it's going to cash flow and all these different things. More importantly, how much you're going to have to spend to get it to that point of what it needs to look like, right? And then it's just a matter of just literally making offers that fall within the budget of what you need to make, right? And that's really it. You make the offer, and then when it comes to operations, that's not me. So
Right.
I don't talk operations. There's so many people on YouTube that talk operations. I try and stay 100% focused on the data. And so my sort of where I help people with, I end right there, right? But yeah, so
I had a conversation with somebody recently about an Airbnb, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, like that. I've seen some people have bought them. Like I've heard it's kind of exciting, but what are some of those numbers that can draw people in? Like what can I actually make in cash flow in a month with a high performing Airbnb?
So the one thing to keep in mind is that it's seasonal. So, it's not the exact same every single month. So whenever I talk, it's not monthly, it's annually that I sort of talk about.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And so my best performing property did $40,000 in pure profit, 100% profit in my pocket. And the second best was around 30,000. Then I had like a few around 20,000. These are places that I rented. Right. So I was renting those, and that was they're making about $90,000 a year. My expenses were about 70. Right. So I was pocketing the other 20. And additionally, I had also a cleaning company, and so the cleaning company was providing me even more money there too. But so what we look for with the fund that I work for is we're looking for like a 15% cash on cash. That's what we go for all the time.
Yep.
That's sort of our goal. We really I have a 20% rule that I use. So I'm always looking for areas around the entire country that meet my 20% rule, which is I want the annual revenue to be 20% of the purchase price. So if it's going to make $100,000, I want to buy the home for 500, right? If I can do that, then the odds of hitting like 20% cash on cash or 15% cash on cash goes through the roof, right? And so that's really what I'm looking for.
for people that have been in the long-term space, sometimes they might hear like $150 a door, $200 a door, $250 a door per month. You're talking about $2,000 per month, $3,000 per month. And there's people that clear $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per month for their properties. And so that's the upside of, why should I learn all these things about regulations and operations and this, that, and the other is your potential for profit here is significantly higher than a lot of long-term opportunities out there.
Yeah, 100%. That's I mean, you're doing more work, but you're making more. But the one thing I can't stress enough is that there are so many people, especially in the United States, that are doing more work and making less money because they bought in the wrong location. They didn't set it up properly. They didn't put the right features in place. They don't know how to take good photos. Like there's so many little things that people have done to like lose. Whereas if you just understood the data, you would know exactly what the home needs to look like and where it needs to be, right? And then from there, it's all figure outable. Like the like how to talk to the guests and how to do all that stuff. That stuff is so easy, but you can't take the wrong location, the wrong size bedroom and bathroom, and operate it the best in the world. You're still going to not make money. Does that make sense? Right? Yep. If I had a 3-bedroom in that Lincoln Park area in Chicago, I could have been the best host and the best listing in the world, but I probably would have made maybe 70,000, and my expenses would have been almost 70,000. Right? So you once you get the right product, right, or the right location, then you can figure everything else out. So I can't stress that like enough.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the bigger picture here, yes, there are tenants that break things. Yes, there are people that do things that they're not supposed to do. But at the same time, the opportunity here is great. So like the numbers we're talking about, yeah, you can't expect to have all this revenue without having some sort of stressors. There's things you can put in place. There's leverage of people, cleaners, handymen, that sort of stuff that can help you out. There's lots of resources out there of people that'll help you furnish properties, what to buy and all that. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity here. And yeah, there's going to be some headaches, but at the same time, the reward here can be great.
Exactly. And the fact that you're making that much more money at the beginning will, you have to do the work, but you're making a little bit more. But because there's so much extra cash flow, you can eventually get to the point at scale where you can hire somebody to actually take care of all those things for you. Right. So when I got to like 10 properties, I think it might have even been like 7 or 8, I ended up hiring on somebody to manage everything. And like they were taking care of the vast majority of all the little day-to-day operations. Right. And I did that because I got her to run the cleaning company, which saved me like enough to pay her a salary. And then she pretty much took over like everything. Right. And so there's enough money coming through that it allows you to be able to do that after a certain number of properties. So something to keep in mind as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, John. Appreciate you coming on. If there's people that are like, hey, this data thing sounds awesome, I want to be able to learn more, how can they find you and what are you going to teach them?
Yeah, so you can email me and we can hop on for a free consultation. I really enjoy meeting everybody that I work with. So my email is hello@pointanalytics.co. That's hello@pointanalytics.co. And a lot of what we talked about today was sort of it's hard to go through numbers without being able to actually show the numbers. But the main thing that my company provides are reports to help people figure out where the most profitable location is within their city. And I have a free course that goes along with that. That's like over 2.5 hours of teaching you everything you need to know to be able to get to that answer. But that report has all of the numbers, all of the data, all of the information, like everything you need. And it's the exact same report that I use on a daily basis for work. So that's if you're looking for something like that, if you really love your numbers, if you really want to be 100% confident about your purchase, my company without a doubt can help you do that.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, John. I appreciate it. Appreciate everything that you shared. Yeah, you're just a wealth of information. And we talked offline beforehand about how, you get the benefit of being great in real estate is you get to use this information to help others, but also for your own personal gain. So if you want to have your own investments, you get to use this information for your own good. And so that's the beauty here. That's why real estate, building wealth through real estate is such a fantastic tool. And so you're just an example of that, of doing it personally, doing it to help others, the job that you're in, and to be able to help others build wealth and create that time freedom. Like you said, yeah, the worst thing in the world is, oh my gosh, I built this so big. Now I have to hire somebody else to run it for me instead of me doing it by myself. So not a bad problem to be in. So, well, thanks so much, John, for coming on. I appreciate having me on.